Hey Rifters, I'm VFX and welcome to another Dream Techniques video. In this video I'm doing the VFX items and how to place them and how they have different effects and what they can have been used on. So if you didn't see the other video before, the VFX settings and how to tweak them and all that kind of things, I'd advise you to watch that because it helps you a lot when working out with all these extra items itself. So, terrain paint. As before, you need protected textures to make it work, and as you can see, it doesn't go on everything. Well, the terrain paints only go on the actual terrain itself, like grass, sand, and all that kind of things. And all the extra stuff placed like rocks, the floor, they don't get affected at all. Only the actual terrain itself. So as you move it, you can see it being moved, but it only affects the terrain. It also affects all building blocks. So in the dimension tab, under dimensions, under building blocks, all these different building blocks will get affected by terrain paints, as you can see here with the pole and the plank. And there are a few other items that can be done from the expert items, like the Brevenic items and Volden Head, which I'm not so sure if it's supposed to be fully like that, but I know that only one or two items can be affected by it, which I don't think it is supposed to. There are some terrain paints, for example, like the emotion ones. As you can see here, these also work on the terrain, but these ones work on everything. These ones just work as a texture on top, and they literally swivels around on every single terrain item possible, but it only works on top of it. For example, as you can see with this terrain paint, it doesn't work underneath items as it bugs out, and so advise it only works on top of items on kind of on this on a slighted angles, but on 90-degree angles and underneath this will not work. With items, a lot of them are pretty simple to see. For example, the massive smokes or on the fires. As they get there, you can move them around the center, make them smaller, make them bigger. Pretty simple to see how they affect. But some of them, for example, like the stained glass, this is kind of a bit different to start off with. So when you spawn it in, it'll be facing sideways, but as we see that we don't actually have a mountain there, we can actually see the terrain actually on itself. So for us then it was easy to see, but normally you might not be able to see it. So this only works one direction, as you can see. We could turn it and it goes different ways, and it also goes up and down. So as it will always face in one direction, you might actually find that you have placed it down but you can't see it because it might be facing the right direction, so you've got to twiddle it round so you can actually see where it wants, because you can only face one direction. As you can see, if you put it through the wall, it doesn't work, and as you get further away it kind of still works, but as too far away it won't work, as with most of the items in here. Same for the ground terrain. If you put it too high it won't work and it will get faded and will go away. So there are a lot of other items, VFX, that are affected by lighting, and make sure that the particle quantity is really high, as all these effects are all to do with pixels and all this kind of thing, so you need that to be really high if you really want to see them all. For example, the motes, these auras here, these have quite a lot of pixels in them, and if you want to see them all, you need to change the lighting effects and as well put up the pixel guarantee, so you can, the pixel particle quantity, so you can actually see them all. But as you can see here, there's two blobs and we can't actually see what they do. Well, these actually affect light. So this is a spotlight, and as you can see, the spotlight is not very clear, so we've got made it really dark in here, and as you move it up and down, the spotlight only goes downwards. So it needs to be pretty much on the item for you to actually see the spotlight in it, and it's not really much of a great effect, and that's the smallest one, so that's pretty much that. You cannot increase the size of them, it does not work, does not make the light any bigger or smaller, you just get the static one. Same goes for the warm and cool lights. There's like the warm lights, orange lights, but most of them are really small, and as they're small they only work when you get closer to them. So on the wall it won't work, a little bit further away it works, get further away and it doesn't work. It does affect by up and going down, but it doesn't work twisting it around, has no effect, or the other direction. It literally only works forward and backwards and down, so you can go downwards. But as you saw, it's kind of like the spotlight for floors, but it also works for walls, so it's kind of pain in the bum. You might not be able to see it because it literally does not do much of effect, and if you've got loads of light on it with no shadows, it might be even harder for you to actually see the difference. For example, if I turn the shadows off in here, you might not actually be able to see much of the lights themselves. Now you can see them because the wall's dark, but for the spotlight it's really hard to get a gist. It just looks like the actual floor itself, but it isn't. So make sure it's kind of hard to see some of these actual items themselves. So the cones or the weather blockers, you can just place them down and anything inside blocks the weather. But the thing is, if you are like here, you cannot click through the cone itself or the weather blocker. If you're inside it, it will be able to click on items inside the thing, but because you have to really zoom in for that, you ain't really going to see that much. So I advise using the cones, the weather blockers last, because you might not be able to click on things inside what you've placed in it without zooming in really far. And lastly, there are effects like dandelions and that have float around, but these only work when your camera is in this area. So right now we can see some dandelions around. If I zoom back out again, we can't see any dandelions on the screen because we're too far away. But if I move over here, put my camera here, we can start to see the dandelions again. So these do work, but you literally have to get really close inside to actually see some of these items. Obviously there are things like occasional water drips and you can see them, but they are quite hard to see and they don't happen very often. And for example, some stuff like the yawning lines and some of the water effects, they have different effects, so when you're not actually looking at them, it's actually a bit hard to see if you can actually see them or not, because they get turned around with your camera. So as you turn your camera around, sometimes the water for like the waterfalls or anything like that. So here's a waterfall curtain. As we can see, it's facing that way, but as I keep on turning around, the actual water itself literally kind of goes in the same direction as me. So if you tilt it in a direction this way, it might not literally be straight always. So I can bring it down so we can actually see it. I'm looking at it now and it's at an angle. Look at it straight, it's alright. Look at it in different angles, it kind of bugs out. So the water kind of bugs out a little bit on you. But all these effects, make sure that you have the pixel quantity up, otherwise you might not be able to see them all. And make sure you watch that video before, as it explains a lot about what items affect, what item sliders affect what for dimensions. And as you can see, they have a lot of different effects for uses, and you can only see them in certain places, and some of them are actually quite hard to see. Even if you can't see them, you've got the high settings on, you can't see it, or it's maybe because you might be using the item wrong as well, as some of them are quite difficult to see or know actually what they're doing. So that's been it for the dream techniques of how the VFX items work. A lot of them are a lot different, and you just have to play around with them, make sure the settings are on full even if you do it, but make sure that you restart the client to actually see them. Thanks for watching this video, and see you again for another video. See you later, Dime Engineers.